force was predominantly people who had been black soldiers in the Federal Army, U.S. colored troops. So for a time, Chattanooga was one of the most liberal places in the country. A black man could come from anywhere and get a job and live fairly well. Well, toward the end of the 1800s, reactionary forces started trying to overcome this. They initiated vagrancy laws. If you got caught on the street without $50 in your pocket, you could be arrested as a vagrant and sent to jail for 6 months. And convict labor came into being. If you were in jail, a business could lease you from the state and basically work you as a slave. That's how the mines were run. That's how the coke ovens at Chickamauga was run. Individuals could even get a likely woman out and have her as their cook. Or get an individual man, make him their butler or something, and keep him chained up out back when he wasn't on duty. And this was after the Civil War. This was when slavery wasn't supposed to exist. That was convict lease. And this system got so bad that in Tennessee, the free miners couldn't get a job because everybody wanted convicts, because you could get them from almost nothing. They overthrew the convict barracks and freed the convicts, and the U.S. militia came in, and there was a war. It's called the Cold Creek War. There was casualties on both sides, and the scandal was such they abolished the convict lease system. Well, in Chattanooga at the time, there was a coalition of people that called themselves the Businessmen of Chattanooga was organized to change the government, where prior to this, the government had an alderman system of government, where each district would elect an alderman, and black districts would elect a black alderman. And there was black policemen, black firemen, and this wasn't like anywhere else in Tennessee. And these people kept agitating, and they tried to get the blacks to leave. They started lynching people. They lynched one man actually in the county jail. They lynched 2 on the Walnut Street Bridge, 1 on the North Chickamauga Creek Bridge going to Saudi. And lynchings were just regular. They were treated like sporting events in the newspaper. In Trenton, there was one lynching that took place by an all-female church group. There was a man in jail, and the women just kept telling their husbands, "You need to hang him." And the men were lax in doing it, so one night after church, the women went down to the jail and got him out and hanged him themselves. And the convict lease system was so bad that people were subject to going to the mines for life without having done any crime of any kind. So a lot of people did leave the area. And the government was changed to an at-large system, which meant that the whole population elected all commissioners. And this simply meant that any time the black population got big enough to start electing officials, they would annex a white rural area and keep the blacks down in population, so they would never be able to have opportunity to elect anybody. And the change in government that Maxine told you about removed that at-large system and put it back to where people could be elected by the districts, and you started having black elected officials again. However, if you followed the recent activities with Mayor Ron Littlefield and others, they're trying to get away from the old district system and go back to at-large elections again. Or even bigger, go to Metro, which there won't be any county, the whole county will just be one district and all the people will be elected at large again. And minorities will have a minority vote. So that's basically what the situation you're facing in Chattanooga is today.
I just want to reiterate about the change in government. About one of the things that the expert witnesses. One was from a Yale University, the other one was from Indiana University, that had done research on politics in Chattanooga, in Tennessee. And one of the statements that was made, it was made by a man by the name of McGowan, who went over to Nashville, the General Assembly in Nashville. And he was complaining about the fact that there were too many blacks on the Chattanooga Police Department. And he said, Now, if either of you gentlemen, we get on a bender, come on over to Chattanooga, rather, come on over to Chattanooga and get on a bender. You'll find a nigger to arrest you, a nigger to put you in jail, and a nigger to take care of you once you get in jail. That was one of the statements that the judge looked at, Judge Edgar, you know, who's no friend of ours, to really tell you the truth, but sort of had to look at this case from a historical perspective. That was one of the statements he looked at to rule on the change in government, but there were others, statements about, you know, how paternal, in other words, white people were not really racist against black folk. They just wanted to treat them like children. That's one of the statements that made. And also that real racialized politics, like I said, about, and we black folk didn't know, we weren't mature enough to handle ourselves in the government. And so they had the knowledge and I guess it's the same way now. It doesn't have to be black folk. It's all of you, they feel the same way about that now. You know, so that's what led to the change in government. It's a historical way blacks have been treated to vote under the Voting Rights Act. And I need to say this too, the Voting Rights Act had been around since 1965. It's one of the few things that came out of the Civil Rights movement was the Voting Rights Act of 1965, and I think it's 1965, I get those two mixed up, and the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And those are some of the things that we got. Now during Reconstruction and when all the black soldiers fought in the Civil War, what they fought for was the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. Now the 13th Amendment, like I said, outlawed slavery in this country, but part of it did, and the part of it brought it back because it gave people who were over prisons and jails the legal right to treat you as a slave. They don't have to, but they could treat you as a slave if you're incarcerated. And the state of Tennessee, they went ahead and ratified the 13th Amendment, they ratified the 14th Amendment. But they did not ratify the 15th Amendment, the right to vote, in the state of Tennessee until 1997. And that was 7 years after we filed our lawsuit. I don't know whether or not they just forgot, or didn't think it needed to be, but they did not ratify. There's statements in Jet magazine about that. In 1997, the state of Tennessee ratified the 15th Amendment. So they really wasn't serious about us voting at all. Anyway, we got some pictures I want to show you and try to go through who was involved in that struggle back during that time and how intense it was, and hopefully everybody is not my friend though, but I'll ignore that.